Go to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the witnesses, and of course I always thank the ranking member for her leadership on these issues. I lived through Katrina, and it's inappropriate to say I lived through it because I wasn't actually there. Excuse me, this may be the President calling. I wasn't actually there. It's not the President. Okay. So I won't take the call. I wasn't actually there, but I arrived shortly thereafter, and I saw the tragedy that was left behind. I went to Sri Lanka after the tsunami. I was in the Philippines after Haiyan. And I know what this looks like, the aftermath. And it's not a pleasant sight, to say the very least. And I'm being quite euphemistic. Here is the question that I have for you, dear friends. Are you indicating that if we had this system in place pursuant to 2901, that we would not have expended the billions of dollars that we had to expend after Katrina, that this would eliminate the necessity for the Federal Government to step in? It's an important question for me and my constituents. Yes, sir, if you would.
So the answer to that is 2901 would not have prevented any of the problems that you just described, because 2901 would continue to leave the NFIP with those policies in high-risk areas. They would continue to have the NFIP charging inadequate rates. It would continue to have subsidies for people who don't need them. So you'd still have the same problem you would today. And as a matter of fact, it would be worse, because the NFIP, instead of broadly averaging its rates and getting revenue for policies in lower risk areas, it wouldn't even have had that revenue. So the situation would be worse today if 2901 had been in place. If our proposal of having the private sector provide the flood insurance, then the $23 billion would not be there today if our system had been in place.
On the question of the billions that we currently find ourselves indebted to, I suppose, the Treasury, would we still have that $23 billion debt if we had 2901 in place?
Well, yes. The $23 billion is not going to go away under the existing situation, and it's certainly not going to go away under 2901. It's going to get worse under 2901 because the private sector is going to take the most profitable of the policies. Remember, I told you earlier that the NFIP puts things into 30 risk categories, with 1 being the lowest risk, 30 being the highest, and then averages that. The private sector is going to come in and take 1 through 14, leaving the NFIP with 15 through 30, the most risk. So the NFIP is going to have almost just the same risk, but much less revenue. So the situation is going to get worse for the NFIP. It's going to let the private sector cherry pick the most profitable policies that are out there. What's needed is to give the private sector the responsibility to handle the entire problem, which is price all of the policies. There's always going to be an issue with affordability, right? There's just no way about it. But you can't have affordability addressed through the insurance pricing system. When you underprice insurance, you create incentives for people to invest badly. You invest in areas where it's not sustainable. It's critical to have risk-based pricing. It's also critical to have financial assistance delivered in the form of loss mitigation. Instead of giving people a grant to pay for the insurance, give them money to mitigate their homes so that they're less exposed to flood. Reduce the cost of flood insurance by reducing the exposure. That's where the target of Federal expenditure should be. The delivery of the insurance should be in the private sector.
Thank you. I will yield back the balance of my time.